Well, thank you everyone for joining. This is our community observation meeting number 5. It's crazy that Cassie and I have been doing this for 5 months now. Today, we are going to be starting off with a quick intro, and then we'll be doing our first set in our Ops Top Dog series that it's Holly Firestone's framework for O, and it's Observe. And so we have some amazing guest speakers who are going to be sharing some of their observation stories. This is so hard because when I say operations and then I start thinking about our group, I say community observations instead. And then now it's observation. It's just like tongue twisters all around. But anyway, just quick intros. I'm Tiffany. I'm Director of Community Operations for a company called Venify. I know a lot of you already, so love to see everybody, and thank you so much for supporting and coming to our meeting. Recent ops project, we are working on our full ideation migration. So we're currently in user voice and we're launching Insighted in about a month with our community. So that's been a big one, and also working on our Salesforce integration.
I am Cassie. Thank you all for joining. I see some familiar faces. So like Tiff said, thanks for supporting and joining us. I work at Atlassian as a community operations manager, focusing on various community programs that we have going on. Personally, I have 2 kids, I have a husband, I have 2 dogs. I like tacos and I like being outside. Now that the kids are back in school, I'm trying to have a better routine in the morning. So the heavy emphasis on exercise and outdoors this week of just trying to find a better, more productive morning routine. And a current ops project that I'm working on is community leader conferences. So our leaders, our brand ambassadors host events in their different cities, but now they're wanting to host events together in their different geos. So maybe like 3 leaders from different cities in Europe hosting like a regional community leader conference. And so we're figuring out the platform and all of that stuff right now. And then also working on integrations with common rooms. So I think the last meeting I mentioned that we were in the process of procuring. We have done all of that, all the risk and compliance, we're over, thank you. But now it's just a matter of like, what integrations are we gonna put in there? What data sources do we wanna listen to? But yeah, those of you who aren't familiar, common room is just a way to see what people are talking about you in various places like Twitter, Bevy, if you use it, different places that to try to nurture your community better. But yeah, I will go into the housekeeping now. Cool. So cameras are totally optional. Obviously, we love to see y'all's faces, but we are all on Zoom calls every day. I mean, maybe some more than others, but still, it's nice to just hear voices sometimes rather than feeling like you have to be on camera. But we do love discussion and engagement. So if you haven't already, tell us what you've eaten in the chat or just engage with us in the chat because it's fun. Why not? And then lastly, questions. If you have any questions for us, you want to present something at an upcoming event, you need some advice around operational things, you can email us at opsforcommunity@gmail.com, but you can also find us in the CMX workspace and the Community Club workspace on Slack under the Community Operations channel.
All right, so just a quick refresher. This is the Top Dogs framework built by Holly, and it essentially kind of breaks down the various pieces of what a community operations person does on a regular basis. So last month, we actually had Holly kick off the series, which is an 11-month series, which is super crazy long, and kind of go over very briefly the various areas and components of the framework. And starting today with Observe, we're going to be doing 1 month for each of these components for the next X number of months. So kicking off Observe, got my little animation going on here, and we have a killer lineup of guest speakers who will be talking about their Observe stories. Do we want to do a quick round of intros? Steph, you want to start?
Absolutely. Hi, everyone. I'm Steph. I obviously see that my Zoom name goes a little bit longer than that, but I go by both. I'm community over at Coda.io, but formerly before this, I was over at Zapier. And I'm based out of the San Francisco Bay Area.
Awesome. Cool. Thank you, Steph. Colton, you want to go?
Hey everyone, my name's Colton. I'm going to be camera on in just a second, but I'm just taking a nice little stroll right now. I'm the community manager at Unqwork, which is a no-code platform based out of New York City. So we are a SaaS platform and excited to chat with everyone today.
Awesome. And Clara.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. My name is Clara. I'm currently the head of community and people over at Gather, which is a people ops platform. And I'm also the founder of TalkBase.
Okay, cool. And then, as we said earlier, we want to make this as conversational as possible. So if you relate to someone's story or have any specific questions or want to share your own, feel free to use chat. And we also have ample time at the end for Q&A and discussion. Oops. Okay, so first we're going to be building a community health report. Sorry,
Hey all. Yeah, I know like glitches a little bit, but it's good. It's good. We're good. Building a community health report. I think that this is something that as thinking about what Holly was saying, observe, like what are the foundations of what we do as far as observing, right? Like I think of listening and not just hearing, but listening. And I think listening is hearing plus action. And so in my perspective, having a community health report is very critical to the listening factor. I think, Tiffany, I think it might have skipped over a slide. Did it over one? There we go. Sorry. I just wanted to go over the definition of what is a community health report. And I really thought about what it meant. I know that we hear things like a snapshot or a quick picture and stuff, but I really want it to be a selfie about the community. And the reason why we say that is because a selfie does not like tell us anything that we don't already know and that we don't already see, right? And of course, there's other people who take these things and put filters or adjust or whatnot. But I think a selfie in itself is true to form at the core of what it is, right? It's just a reflection, it's a mirror of what it is. And so it's not about the ROI or the analytics or how many users are in the community. I definitely want it to be kind of like the raw, the details, the fine lines, like the smile lines, whatever it is that you want to call it. And we just want to look at everything. And we want it to look as if it came from how does it feel when we see a community is a human investment? And what is reflecting back at us when we see those things? And so the objectives that should go into a community health report that we should be listening for, and I put it as BIC, which is benefit, impact, and change. What benefit are we giving our members on this community health report? What is the impact of what they do? What is the impact of what we do for the community? So it's very like bidirectional on this front. And then change. What opportunities are we overlooking? What opportunities are we not seeing? What opportunities have we tried and didn't work out? So this should all be things that you're listening for, okay? Keep in mind that all the actions taken up until that point, that's fine for historical context, but as far as this, we have to listen when we're making this report. And of course, how do we listen? It includes surveys, interviews, general feedback, whatever you can find as far as like historical documentation, whether it's written by your moderators, your staff, anybody on your immediate team. And Tiffany, can I get to the next slide, please? And I just want to answer the question of also, what is it that you need when you think about a health report? Like, when do you have one? I've found that during the whole time that I've been thinking about building health reports, it's usually very helpful when you take over an active community. This could be anything from transitioning to an existing community or acquiring a community, merging with a different community, moving a community from a Facebook group to maybe incited, right? Like there's just like a lot of taking over that this could mean. And this would also give you and your decision-making group insight to the future direction that you want to take your community in. This would also reveal missed opportunities or unknown issues that maybe have, time has passed and there have been changes on your team and this information had either not gotten written down or passed on. And also when you're rebuilding an inactive community, definitely collecting historical information or archival information. And identifies missing gaps and general cleanup objectives. And I love the idea that this takes place, especially when you're rebuilding, is because you kind of have to know what's broken in order to fix it, right? And I think that that's the critical part here, why you could use a community health report when rebuilding a community. And really, whenever you decide, I really want to stress that this doesn't have to have a timing of whether or not you need a health report. I've seen some groups do it as frequent as once a quarter, but I imagine once a year, especially if your community is very big, would be suffice just as a pulse check. And so that's my section about building a community health report and how that hits up listening. I would love to pass this on to Colton, unless anybody has some questions for me. So I'll look in chat.
Steph, quick question for you, actually. When you're doing a community health report, is it like a document or a PowerPoint presentation? And I think it's important, given how many different departments and teams within an organization community touches, that like a lot of people see this report and look for ways to improve and from their perspectives as well. Do you have any strategy on like publishing your health report across the company or doing some sort of presentation so that people are aware of it?
Absolutely. And you can take two approaches to this. The first approach is a general presentation, just letting people know like any interesting findings or highlights or very like, whoa, this caught me off guard when I discovered this, right? Like you want to surface those as signal. But there's another approach that I think that you can take as well, is that you can definitely break up the community health report into sections and maybe spread that across to different sessions across the company so that people can really absorb like the context of each and not just get it in a singular presentation. I find that that minimal digest that happens each time, so that there's like a very focused area of the report that comes out, really helps the company be very involved in the solution. So while you're presenting, I think the critical takeaways is to really get people to think about solutions, get people thinking about how can they be a part of the solution. And so if you break that up into like kind of digestible parts, you're more likely to get people to be involved and saying, whoa, I'm already invested in this. I attended previous sessions. And I feel like the upcoming ones, I can be even more involved. So building a little bit of FOMO there is actually really helpful when presenting.
I love that.
Cassie wrote, what tools do you use to create this report? I have used everything from Google Docs to shared collaborative presentations. When I was at Zapier, we use Coda, and obviously at Coda, we use Coda. And so I think that the flexibility of collaborating on a single doc is not just important, but it's very critical. And it gives you a log of the changes and things that you've observed and listened over the time, and then comes back to the perspective of, okay, here's what we did last year, here's what we're finding is different. And so tracking your progress in these reports is definitely part of like the tooling aspect, is that what helps you track these changes. And it could be, like I said, a simple doc, or if you have a shared collaborative space, like using a Mural or any other, brainstorming tools.
Very cool. Anyone have any other comments or questions on community health report, either sharing their own stories or asking Steph a question? All right. Cool. Well, not too late. Feel free to use chat if something comes to you. Otherwise, we're going to go to Clara, actually, founders and community.
Thank you so much. And quick apology to everyone. I do have some kind of weird cold from the AC from the airplane. So if I might sneeze during the presentation, please excuse me. Hopefully that will not happen. Yeah, so let's do this. I have worked in many startups, which allowed me to always be very, very close to the founder. And something I have observed that is that and companies are very early stage, they take to have kind of the first draft of their values. And I noticed that it's very similar in community, right? Kind of the first draft, the first hypothesis of your community that you have is usually kind of, the very pink and unicorns idea of what the community would be like, and then you start working with more members and you get feedback and you start building. But I noticed that the early stages are very similar, right? Because you're starting to build something from the scratch. So I started being really interested in terms of what do kind of the values the founders of the company hold, and how does that reflect into the community? If you are a community manager that gets hired early on into a company, let's say a startup or a very, very small team, you're very likely to work very close with the vision of the founders. So I wondered if there's any kind of similarities there. What I noticed that, there can, it's always interesting to see what are the values of the community that you set as the first thing versus what's the value of the community for the company. And both of these actually, I believe, have to be defined on the very beginning. And it's interesting to follow companies that either set really, really great values for their communities early on, but don't really set the mission, right? Don't set the business purpose, and vice versa, right? I'm pretty sure we all know communities that are really built for business, but that are kind of missing like the little bit of a human touch, I would say. So I started talking to all different founders and kind of reflected on some of the companies I have worked for. And what I noticed is that, both of these communities, whether it's a founder-led community, meaning the founder was the very first community manager that's kind of started building the relationship, versus the later established communities, both of these have pros and cons, right? If a founder is very early on involved in the community, then the community has a really great mission. And usually it kind of gets the values directly from the founder. Versus if you are building it later as an experienced community manager, you know what you're doing, but you kind of have to go back and search for those values with your leadership. And, both of these absolutely need the leadership support. So if we go to the next slide, I kind of observed what, I actually read this book a few weeks ago, a book where this framework was mentioned. It's by Daniel Goleman, which is he's the founder of emotional intelligence. And he's talked about these emotional leadership types. And I said, all right, how about I look at the way founders lead their companies versus how I, as a community manager, led the communities, and see if there were any similarities there. And if I can see, if for the future roles for any of us, or anyone who's kind of, looking for a new role, if you can kind of determine based on the values of the founders what the community will look like. So if we can go to the next slide, I actually went through some of my past experiences, and currently at Gather, I looked at our values and I noticed that our values at Gather are both visionary and as well as affiliative. So, some of our company values are, put others first, see other people, practice empathy. And I've noticed, those are very empathetic values. And I've noticed that our community is exactly the same. A lot of the things that I hear from our users are, I love that I can meet like-minded people. I really love being here. One of our values, community values, is we show empathy towards other community members. And I had no idea that actually our company values were so linked. So I started to dig deeper, and I did a research through bunch of communities. I decided to just put the companies I know here so I can speak from my perspective, as well as one external example. But I absolutely encourage you to do this because I feel like it's really, really interesting to see, kind of what the company mood is like versus what the community mood is like. A second example I have is from my previous experience when I was working at DeepNote. DeepNote is a data science company, or basically they're building a tool for data scientists. And I noticed that the culture of the company is really pace-setting and authoritative. So some of the values the company has are: we are explorers, we are the makers. And what I noticed that some of the community values and the community wording we had was, learn faster, showcase what you are doing. So again, I found that these two were very, very similar. And again, this all goes back to the mindset of the founders. I've noticed that both in the companies where I worked. I really found it fascinating, and am always kind of wondering, how much as a community managers we can influence the culture of the community, versus the culture of the company, and how much the founders actually influence that. Another example, last one I had, while I did my research for this, I decided to use Reddit. I figured everybody would probably know Reddit, and the culture, as I would describe it. Hopefully, I'm right. I have not worked at Reddit, so if anyone has experience, please be sure to raise a hand. But what I've noticed, and from a lot of the reading I did, is that the culture is both democratic and affiliative. And some of the company values, when I read through their handbooks, where we embrace flexibility, we embrace feedback, we want to make sure everybody in the world can belong here. And I found kind of like these two, democratic and affiliative, were the most kind of upcoming for me in those texts. And when I read again through the community values, it was pretty much the same. So I thought I share this today. I often think, how can I as a community manager influence, what the community will look like, what will be the values. And I'm not sure how much portion we can actually influence, and which part is actually influenced by the founders. But I did find it fascinating. So I wanted to share this with everyone. I love developing. I come from an HR background originally a few years ago. So I was, building both company values and community values. So maybe that's kind of when I noticed this as well. So please let me know if you notice this in your communities, if, you have been able to change some of the values or the ideas in your communities. And yeah, thank you so much for listening.
Clara, looks like you have a question. Any tips for process of developing your first set of community values?
Yeah, that's such a great question. Thank you so much, Liz. So I think what I always love to do is kind of, envision yourself in the community member's shoes, and you actually are the first member of your community, right? When you start your community. So think about, what I want the headline of my community to be 5 years from now in New York Times. That's my favorite exercise. What do I want the title be in the next 5 years of what I'm building? Do I want my community to be inclusive? Do I want it to be powerful? Do I want it to be trend-setting? And you can kind of, you can have everything, but you have to pick a few. I think that's always the rule. And most importantly, choose the values such way that they don't only explain the why, but they also explain the how. So choose your values such way that they help you, kind of embrace the behavior that you want for your community to have. Imagine if you left your community be for 1 month, how would you like the users to behave? Would you like them to take part in the community? Would you like them to talk to each other? Would you like them to organize events or meetups, kind of, help them? I think the values are kind of, setting, I would say, the pace, and also setting the tone of your community. So, think about what your headline would be, and think about what, how your community should make decisions. And I think, you can have your first set of values. And I think we have another question. Very cool. What are the 3 most important hygiene activities one should perform while starting a new community? That's a really good one. I think that one of the most important things for me, for example, when starting our community currently with Gather, we decided to have a few tier community. So we have like 3 different tiers to our community, and based on your role, you can actually get invited to our special groups, because our community is very oriented about the roles of our users, but also around our product. Excuse me. And actually vetting people has been one of the most important thing. You really want, and I think this is very similar to, for example, to fundraising or to hiring, you always want the people that are really, really excited. If you have to spend, too much time explaining your idea, explaining your values, explaining the mission of your community, the person is not 100% on your side, and you can absolutely find someone who is. So that's like the number one most important thing from me that I have learned during the last few years, is always find the people that are really, really excited and can be your not only your super fans, but also your encouragers inside the community. And I think that second thing is always consistency. And I think that being consistent, not only with the good things, but also with the tough things, is really important. So making sure everybody gets an answer inside the community, making sure that the members that don't belong to the community are no longer there if they breach your community code of conduct, or if you require members to be active, if they're inactive, whatever your your code of conduct or ground rules in your community might be. I think being thorough there is also very important, right? You are building the community for its members, so I think it's our job to make sure that everybody feels welcomed and everybody wants to be there 100%. Yeah, so I think I only have two important things. Yeah, but hopefully they were helpful.
Thanks so much, Clara. That was very insightful. I love the whole setting of the culture, and how the founders really kind of set that baseline for the future of community, and thinking about that throughout the development process of starting one. Also want to kind of do some uplifting and sharing of things that people are working on. Clara, do you want to talk about Talkbase for a second?
Oh, sure. Yeah, so as I mentioned, I've grown, my role has changed from HR to operations to community. So I've been kind of wearing these multiple hats for a really long time. And with organizing, I think like 70 events last year, I got really tired of Google Docs. I just know that there has to be something better, how to manage my speakers and my events and all the things I'm working on. So a friend of mine, as well as me, decided to build Talkbase, which is basically the people, or I could say like event managers, project management system, where you can build your database of speakers, actually publish your speaker bio if you're a speaker yourself, and work with your team on your events, and not having to have 7 different tools to manage everything. So we're actually in the process of fundraising. We've already secured a small round from angel investors. Yeah, and we'll be starting to hire pretty soon.
So exciting. Clara gave me a little demo, or I think 2 weeks ago or so, and it was very cool. So if you're interested at all, be sure to contact her.
Yeah, that would be amazing. And thank you for the shout out.
Oh, of course. Alrighty. Colton.
Awesome. Well, if we could go in chronological order of kind of what we've talked about today through these 3 sessions, I would say it would be probably Clara's first, in the sense of you're discovering the value of your community, and then what I'm about to speak of, which is kind of like creating that value, and then what Steph talked about, which is how do you show that value and kind of how do you shout that out and make sure everyone's on the same page. So I just want to talk really quickly about using trends to improve your community experience. So first of all, be an essential worker. We all know what that means, right? So don't worry so much. It's exactly what Steph said. Don't worry so much about your ROI and just proving your value. I feel like so many community managers spend their time like trying to say, okay, how do I prove that we're valuable? and we're trying to come up with these charts and figure out these metrics and come up with this this calculation to say, look, we're really valuable, please don't fire us. But in the reality of it, it's like, okay, we'll actually just provide value and you won't have to make that case, right? You can just actually do it. And that's a better use of your time. That's a better use of your community's time. And then you don't even really need to have this conversation. It's actually funny. At Uncork, we were talking a little bit about, okay, what if we did put an ROI on our community? And they're like, who cares? Everyone knows that it's valuable. Like we're way past that conversation. So that's a really good place to be. And if you can get there, you're in a good spot. So the question to ask there is, what does your community need? And then be that source for them, right? So kind of like we've talked about, having your ear to the ground, what's going on with the community, being really aware of that, and then having systems that feed back into the various departments at your company, or however your structure is set up to the higher ups, so that they know, okay, here's what's going on the ground, here's what needs to change, so we have a better community experience, because that's what it's really all about, right? That's how we can provide value. So know what they're going to say before you send the survey. So it's kind of like was already mentioned, like we already know that kind of selfie of the community. We already see what the community looks like. We understand that, and just be proactive. Like, don't wait for someone to complain about something before you're already working on it. And that's what I want to show you guys next. Just get in the trenches with your community, keep your ear to the ground. What are you hearing as trends? Okay, so here on this next slide, I want to talk really quickly about kind of the trends that we started to notice and how we were able to get ahead of the ball on that. So what we've used a lot in our community, because we're a SaaS platform, we basically have created this product that people have never used before. So there's a lot of questions, right? People have access to our documentation, but they have lots of follow-up questions. So the first thing I want to pop up here is what our Q&A looks like. Just this long feed. We've had it on Stack Overflow for a long time, and basically allowing our community to freely ask questions. Hey, how do I do this? How do I do that? So what we're able to do is, okay, we have this insight to see, here's the questions people are asking. How can we get ahead of the ball and improve their experience before they come to us and say, I'm giving you guys like a low NPS score or CSAT score because I didn't like this about your product or whatever. How can we be proactive? How can we provide value? And so what we did, and this next picture here, you see the trends that we were able to measure, and seeing, okay, there's this one trend that's much higher than the rest of these, and that actually stayed active for over half a year. And we're able to say, okay, this is something that people are asking questions about all the time. So we can assume several things about it. First of all, they don't understand intuitively or through our documentation how this should work. And so that's leading them to go and have to ask the question to the community. So let's measure that. And we're able to see, okay, they're tagging this particular thing. In this example, I have data parsing, right? So data parsing is by far the most tagged option that people are using. And you can see those tags over there in that picture to the left at the bottom of each question on Stack Overflow. And so that's a way we're able to say, okay, this is a priority for us. People don't understand this intuitively. Let's make it more intuitive in our product, and let's really ramp up the documentation for that. And so what we saw for a while was, you can see in March, we really ramped up the end product intuitiveness of that. And so we're able to directly in product say, okay, here's what each of these different operators do. Here's how this particular thing works. And so then we saw a huge decrease in questions, and now we're seeing them pop back up as recently as July. And so now we have to go back to the drawing board and say, okay, what's causing this again? Why is this spiking again? What's making some of these other trends spike and some of the others not? So just keeping a real ear to the ground and being able to say, okay, this is what's happening in our community. We're noticing things, we can infer some things about what's going on. We have data to back it up. And then actually taking this to the various departments that you're working with, the people who are decision makers, and saying, here's what's happening with our community. What are we going to do about it? And that's how you're really going to provide value for your community is, before someone comes to you and says, hey, this really sucks, this is why we left, you can actually kind of see those things that are pain points, and you can provide value for your community up front. So that's really what I wanted to share.
That's awesome, Colton. Thank you. I think definitely being proactive and just like, keeping an eye out on trends and behavioral patterns and what's going on in the community, and then being able to, act on that before it escalates to something is a huge part of community operations, and just, observing. Looks like you have a question.
Yeah, thanks, Jess, for asking. Yes, this is a manual process. I've been working with Stack Overflow for Teams for last year or so, pretty closely on kind of their roadmap for their product. And there are like dashboards and that sort of thing where you can kind of see certain analytics and not others. This is one that you can't see, and they're actually looking at like actually adding it to the dashboard. But yeah, basically I would go through and I think if you're, I'm assuming you're using the product, which is why you're asking. If you go under the tags section, you can see how many were asked each month, and then you would just have to pull that into Excel, numbers doc, whatever you're using for those analytics, if that answers your question. So yeah, I was just looking at the number of tags on a month-to-month basis.
Looks like we have another question. What kind of tools do you wish you had to measure analytics for your community?
So I wish I had. Well, obviously, if you have a tool that can pull in API endpoints from all your different data sources into one clean dashboard, like that's the purple pony, right? That's what everyone wants. I think there's some tools that are good at that. Like if you're using Snowflake, Tableau, that sort of thing, there's lots of customization if you have the people who understand how to use those tools and how to pull that data, and especially that the different resources that you're using in your community can speak to those endpoints. I think that's kind of like a perfect world in community land. But I don't know if Steph or Clara want to comment on that.
Colton, a question for you on that. Are you saying like the purple pony would be kind of like a single pane of glass where you're like looking through and it shows you this one like unified view on that? Or are you just saying like, I just want to go to one place and find all of these different tools and measure areas that I use? Because I feel like there's a slight difference, because I think of like, like ComSor, Orbit, Common Room as like a single pane of influencers that talk, interact on your community. And then there's other things like just a place that I know, hey, this is my dashboard, but it goes to Snowflake and Tableau and all these other areas that are much more like metric based, right? And it's not telling you a story. It's basically giving you the tools to tell a story. Whereas like ComSor, Orbit, and Common Room tell you a story. So I was curious which one of the two.
Yeah, I mean, whenever you're looking at metrics, the more you pull in, the more assumptions you have to make. For instance, if I'm looking at this graph to the right, I'm making the assumption that more people had an issue with that top knowledge gap in the month of July than in June. But if I pull up another data point, which shows how many questions were being asked in our community month to month, I can see that it dipped in June and peaked in July. So maybe it actually didn't have anything to do with that at all. So yeah, it really, to me, is about having more data points so that you can figure out these correlations and you're not doing guesswork. Because I'm sure a lot of you probably, when you see that trend up in July, you're like, oh, people had an issue there. Well, actually, that wasn't the case in our situation, and you wouldn't have known that unless you would have had multiple data points all in one spot just to kind of tell the story. So I don't think that necessarily answers your question, but yeah, the more data points in one place, the better. And the fewer, I would say, the fewer assumptions you make, the better too, because often those can be wrong.
Any more questions for Colton? All right, well, if you have any, throw them in the chat. But thank you, Colton, Clara, and Steph, for your presentation, your insight. It's super valuable, and I know it's been helpful for the greater group. So I want to thank y'all again for joining us and presenting. But next up, next month's event will be on the plan topic. So since a lot of us are planners, we'd love to hear from you and your experience. So if you have something to share about planning a success story, maybe a lesson learned, tips or tricks, or you're just currently in the works of planning something, we would love to hear from you. So you can email us at opsforcommunity@gmail.com, as you see right here on our screen, or like I said earlier, you can catch us in the community club workspace or the CMX workspace. But we love hearing from y'all and the different stories. You know, there's like, it just makes it so much more fruitful. So please reach out if you're even thinking about or planning something right now. Final notes. Awesome. So I'll just leave y'all with the final notes. So join us on our OPServations community on Luma to stay updated on upcoming events, recordings, and slide decks. We upload all the content after the event. So maybe a coworker might be interested. You can go to that bit.ly link to find all of those recordings and content, but also you can share out with anybody else who's interested in joining. And then also a very exciting final note, our very own Tiff is presenting at CMX Summit on September 1st at 11:30 a.m. Pacific time. And she will be presenting on selling the value of community operations. So please don't miss that. Actually, Tiff, if you don't mind, can you throw the bit.ly link in here now, just so people can have it? I want everybody to RSVP and see.
Yes.
Um,
Yeah, I will try.
Okay. If not, like I said, all this stuff is going to be on the stuff, but I just really excited. All the stuff that you're doing and you're talking about and uplifting community operations, it's just been amazing. So if you haven't checked out one of her talks, go to CMX Summit and check it out.
Thanks, Cassie.
Yeah. Awesome. Cool. I know we have like 15 minutes left. So if anybody has any questions, anything they want to share, anything, honestly, we've got 15 minutes left, or we can leave y'all, give you 15 minutes back. Either way, I will be quiet for like 10 seconds because I always am like, okay, nobody said anything, I'll go.
Yeah.
But yeah. Awesome. Well, then I will catch y'all at the next event, hopefully. But thanks for joining again. And thank you again to Colton, Steph, and Clara. That was amazing. And we'll see
Thank
y'all
you,
later.
everyone. Bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Have a great day. Bye.